Fox News Alert, all eyes on the U.S. Supreme Court today as the justices hear oral arguments in a much-anticipated religious liberty case. They are deciding whether the First Amendment protects a Colorado baker from making a wedding cake for a gay couple. He claims it goes against his Christian belief that marriage is between a man and a woman. The ACLU argues the baker broke Colorado law, which bars any business from turning away customers based on their sexual orientation. The first reports out of the courtroom so far are that the justices appear closely divided on the issue. Let's bring in Jeremy Dys, Deputy Counsel for At First Liberty Institute, Elizabeth Wydra, President of the Constitutional Accountability Center. Each firm that they work for filed opposing amicus briefs for this case. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. So you give some really interesting examples, tough examples, of what this really decides. One has to do with whether or not you could force a survivor of the Holocaust to bake a cake for a Nazi rally. Go on, tell me your side.
Yeah, that's exactly what's at stake here. Look, we don't want a First Amendment that can force its citizens to create a message that is a government-sponsored, government-approved message. The First Amendment requires that we protect artistic expression throughout this country. And this is consistent with what the Supreme Court has held over the decades here. If it was in for-profit companies, for instance, have a right not to be compelled to speak a message with which they disagree. That's Miami Times versus Tornillo. Even during the height of World War II, the Supreme Court took pains to make sure that Jehovah's Witnesses were not compelled to salute the flag. That's in West Virginia versus Barnett. These are famous cases, and it shows our country's commitment to diversity, to tolerance, and that's what the Supreme Court was really concerned about today. Whether we had a commission that was itself dedicated against Mr. Phillips here or not. I think this is going to be a very narrow ruling by the court, and we're just going to have to see whether or not our commitment to the First Amendment extends this far.
So, Elizabeth, we're already getting those early reports, as I just told our viewers, that the divisions are very close. Is there an actual clear victory that will come about with all of this? And are there clear people who will lose with all of this? What's at stake?
Well, it's certainly something that the justices seemed fairly divided on, because there's an important principle that if you go into the public marketplace as a business, no matter what your personal beliefs may be, you can't get a license to discriminate on the basis of race, religion, gender, national origin, or here sexual orientation. So the idea is that if this baker is opposed to same-sex marriage, he can certainly believe that in his church, in his personal life, but when he goes into the public marketplace, he has to treat same-sex couples the same that he would other couples. And here he refused to make a wedding cake for them simply because they're gay, and that's unlawful.
There are other services, and I've been reading about this, and I'm sure since your firms wrote amicus briefs, you can probably talk to this in detail. Jeremy, there were some other things that the baker said that he could do that were on the list of services. He didn't want to bake a cake for this couple. I mean, at the end of the day, I disagree with you, Elizabeth, in terms of he didn't actually get a license based on his religion. Is there something I'm missing, Jeremy?
No, of course not. Look, if Elizabeth's vision for the First Amendment is going to hold true, then each of us are going to be able to have religious freedom on Sunday morning, but not when we go back to work on Monday morning. But that's not what the Supreme Court has held, and it's not even what Justice Kennedy held just a few years ago at the Supreme Court in Obergefell, where he said that religions and religious persons have the right to advocate according to their religious beliefs. We want a First Amendment that is broad and effective.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think, no one's stopping them from advocating, but again, it has long been the law, and the Supreme Court upheld against a religious challenge by a barbecue chain in 1968, a challenge that owner did not want to serve African Americans or interracial couples because of his religious beliefs, and the court rejected that. So it's not about being anti-religion, it's about being pro-equality. And you can't just say, oh, well, you can go eat at another restaurant down the street. That wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now.
So you've mixed in the idea of race, you've got sexual orientation, but Jeremy, in reading your notes, because I like to read a good brief too, this drills all the way down to politics. You say, as an example, would you force a liberal baker to bake for Trump's inauguration? Why do you take it to that level, and is that where you think a decision on this would really go?
I think it inevitably goes there. And notice that Elizabeth has still not answered that question. Will the court's decision, if they rule in favor of the ACLU, which, by the way, recently said and still says on their website that freedom of expression for ourselves requires freedom of expression for others with which we might disagree. But Elizabeth still hasn't answered the question, should an Orthodox Jewish person who maybe survived the Holocaust, should that person be forced to create a cake for a Nazi rally?
Let's let her
hardly
answer.
think so.
Yeah,
I'd
love to answer that. So first of all, being a member of the Nazi Party is not a protected class under non-discrimination laws, in the same way that race, religion, gender, and sexual orientation in this case is. So a better example would be if you have a baker who is an atheist, would he be required to bake a cake for a Christian? And he would, because we have the principle that people who come to the public marketplace cannot be discriminated on these important protected factors. Trying to make it about something that this case isn't about just makes it maybe perhaps more cleverly packaged, but it doesn't mean that it wins under the law.
Wow, great conversation. I appreciate both of you coming in since your firms wrote an amicus brief in each case. You've made your cases here on Outnumbered Overtime. We appreciate that. Jeremy Dys and Elizabeth Wydra, thank you very much.
Great to be with you.
We will, of course, follow this case that's happening at the U.S. Supreme Court level and bring you the news as it happens. 1 week from